Hey Internet, it's your old friend Dominic here with the All-America Casino Guide, the only channel that's going to provide you all the tips, tricks, tutorials, and sometimes trivia that you need to know about casinos and casino games. Today we're going to be talking about something very interesting and close to my heart, and that is Baccarat in Bond films. Before we get into the actual discussion for today, I want to remind all the newcomers to the channel, or anybody who hasn't already, to click that subscribe button and make sure to ring-a-ding-ding that notification bell, because it's the only way you're going to be notified every single time we upload something new and exciting to the channel. Today, as I said earlier, we're going to be talking about Baccarat in Bond films. Ian Flemming, the author of the James Bond novels that have served as the inspiration for the film franchise, was in fact a gambling aficionado. In fact, he knew a lot more about casino games than he did about guns and gin martinis. I mean, after all, what kind of self-respecting secret agent would use a Beretta? But while Baccarat is played in several Bond novels, it has often been changed to other games in the more modern adaptations. Casino Royale, for example. Baccarat is the game played in the finale of his debut Bond novel, Casino Royale, in 1953, as well as the TV adaptation that was shot live soon after the novel's release in 1954. Some versions of Baccarat were also played in a spoof film made about Casino Royale in 1967 with Orson Welles. Yes, that Orson Welles, the guy who directed Citizen Kane in '41 and did the War of the Worlds radio play in 1938 as Le Chiffre. Lots of screen time for Woody Allen here, and a musical score by Burt Bacharach, not to be confused with the mispronunciation of the game of Baccarat. Poker replaced Baccarat in the 2006 film starring Daniel Craig. You might think that's because Baccarat was just not a very well-known game by 2006. But in 1950s, it also was not actually that popular of a game either. In fact, Fleming included a guide to Baccarat in his original printing of the Casino Royale novel, so his readers could follow the action. Well, let's talk about that shift more in a little bit. But right now, let's do a little bit of a French lesson, so please, pardon my French. All the French you need to know in a game of Baccarat is as follows. Carte means hit me. Suivi, follow. If you've lost the last round, you can take the first position in the first round of betting. Sept means 7, 8, 8, and 9, 9. Again, pardon my French. Not only did Baccarat feature in Fleming's first Bond novel, Casino Royale, but it also was a prominent game in the first Bond film, Dr. No, starring the iconic and ultra-suave Sean Connery. Dr. No opens with the famous Baccarat scene where Bond meets Sylvia Trench. They are both playing a version of Baccarat you won't see often in the US. This is Chemin de Fer, also commonly referred to as Chemin.
Tell me, Miss Trench, do you play any other games besides Chemin de Fer?
The most obvious difference between Chemin de Fer and regular Baccarat is the fact that each player also deals, and as a result, the game is a lot faster than traditional Baccarat. Unless, of course, you're in a Bond film where you have to make banter between each and every hand, and I do mean each and every hand.
Looks like you're out to get me.
It's an idea at that.
As Miss Trench is finding herself down in the trenches, she keeps losing and saying suivi.
Suivi, suivi.
And after this awkward let's put our last names first, and then our first and last names introduction.
Trench. Sylvia Trench.
Bond. James Bond.
Miss Trench finally redeems herself when she draws an 8.
8 à la porte.
Which would normally be a very awesome hand, but not when you're playing against Bond, James Bond.
Bond. James Bond. Because
he draws, wait for it, a natural win of a 9.
9 à la banque.
In 1965's Thunderball, Bond sits down with someone who we automatically know is the bad guy because he's wearing the most iconically bad guy costume you could possibly be wearing, a white suit and an eye patch. I mean, you don't get much more bad guy than that. And things don't go so smoothly because before our titular character James Bond can sit down at the table with the villain Emilio Largo, Bond, James Bond, announces Banco, meaning he wants to bet the limit.
Banco. Banco, sir.
And then, the nerve of this guy, he decides to win against Largo.
8.
8 à la porte.
Someone has to lose.
And at this point, Largo just gets steaming. And when they start exchanging names, he won't even let James Bond get his full name out. He only allows him to say Bond.
Mr.
Bond.
Oh, yes. Mr. Bond.
The nerve of this guy, he is absolutely the worst. And so they up the stakes. which was already at the table limit, so I'm not quite sure how that works.
Any objection to raise the limit? 500 pounds, shall we say?
Bond James Bond wins with a 7 against Largo's 6.
7.
7 à la pointe.
6.
And the next round, Largo confidently overturns an 8.
8 à la pointe.
But Bond, James Bond, undeferred, has, can you guess it?
9.
9 à la pointe.
Oh no, he didn't. Yes, he did, because he's Bond, James Bond. So there's also an extended Baccarat scene in Goldeneye that serves to heighten the sexual tension between Pierce Brosnan's Remington Steele doing his best James Bond impression and Xena Onatopp. Yes, that's her actual character name. The match is so full of sexual innuendo that it borders on parody.
It appears we share the same passions. 3, anyway.
I can't too. Motoring and Baccarat.
For example, after she beats Bond 7 with her 8, she suggests that she hopes he's better in the sack than he is at Baccarat.
I hope the third is where your real talent lies.
He replies,
One rises to meet a challenge.
and Miss Onatopp comes out on a top for the first match, but she's then bound by Bond, fearing to go bust. Onatopp stands at a 5, but Bond managed to top her with his 6. So don't worry, Bond does come out on top at the end of the match, and Bond and Onatopp have spicy post-game dialogue that alludes to things yet to come.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Ksenia Sergeyevna Onatopp.
Onatopp?
Onatopp.
In Her Majesty's Secret Service, okay, I admit this is more in the background for this one, Contessa Teresa di Vincenzo, holy crap, try to say that name 3 times fast, is also played by Olenna Tyrell in the Game of Thrones. She bets more than she owns and is about to be thrown out of the casino.
I don't have any money.
When Bond covers her debt,
Please continue.
Merci.
and they waltz off to have a drink together. Eventually, Bond and Contessa get married. So there's 2 important lessons to be learned from this film. The first is that Baccarat can bring people together to form a lifelong commitment. The second is that you should also perform random acts of kindness, because the next person you help might end up offing Joffrey Lannister. So as you can see, Baccarat plays a very prominent role in the Bond novels and the Bond films. But I don't think I've really answered the question, why Baccarat? To answer that, we have to get a little bit more theoretical. And that is simply that Baccarat is a game of chance, not of skill. And there's something that appeals to audience about that, or at least it did to Fleming. You see, outside of cheating, there's really nothing that Bond can do to make himself win, or even give himself an advantage. So in agreeing to sit at a Baccarat table, Bond puts his life and the welfare of his country in the hands of fate. When Bond plays a game like poker where skill, or at least choice, determines the outcome, the audience might maintain some sense of calm in the conviction that Bond is smarter and more creative than his opponents. But in a game of chance like Baccarat, we cannot simply rely on Bond's intellect. We can contrast a larger-than-life devil-may-care Roger Moore Bond with Daniel Craig's in Casino Royale. For much of Craig's Bond roles, he plays a Bond who's obviously aging and rethinking his womanizing ways, and in fact is more apprehensive about the effects of the intelligence he's gathering. This Bond gets bloodied more in fights, and we're used to seeing him struggle. So whereas Moore's Bond might coast through a game of Baccarat, modern audiences want to see a Bond who struggles and relies on his brains, not just his fate. Wagering the West's livelihood in a game of Baccarat becomes unthinkable in our modern age, which is why Casino Royale left the Baccarat table and moved to the poker table. Today's Bond isn't going to step up to a 50-50 chance of success without something up his sleeve, or at least something up his head. I hope you enjoyed our overview of Baccarat and Bond films. If there's anything we happen to have left out, go ahead and show the channel a little love by leaving a comment down below. And while you're at it, clickety-clack that like button, ring-a-ding-ding that notification bell, and slam that subscribe button. My name's Dominic. This is the All-American Casino Guide reminding you, play responsibly.